In the previous video, we talked about constructors, so let's now finish off our discussion about constructors and come up with a constructor challenge. So the other thing you may have noticed looking at this code is that I've actually updated the fields directly. I haven't used the setters, so there is an alternative. What we could have done is we actually could have done something like set number. And the advantage of that would be, of course, if we had some validation in here that was testing for valid numbers and those types of things, we could actually execute that code as well. Now in Java, there is conflicting opinions as to which is the best approach, because you'll find out in the next video when we start talking about subclassing, in other words, talking about inheritance, that this won't always work. So the general rule of thumb is it's actually better to save the values from the constructor directly to the field rather than calling the setter, because as you'll see in the next video, there can be scenarios where this code that's in the setter isn't executed. So by going back and actually doing the code directly, in other words, going back and setting it to this dot and whatever the field name is, you're guaranteed that the field values will be initialized. So that's my general rule of thumb is with constructors is don't call setters or any other method other than another constructor within those constructors. And the other reason for that is this is the point in the constructor where the object is being created. So consequently, some aspects of the initialization may not have been finished while you're in the constructor. And that's the other reason that there's an opinion out there that suggests that you shouldn't be calling other methods or even the setters within a constructor code. But we can talk more about that later if needed. For now, again, go with what I've suggested, which is just saving the field values directly rather than calling setters or any other method. Now, the other thing I want to show you is another shortcut that IntelliJ's got. Let's just assume that we wanted to create another constructor that we only passed the customer name, email address, and constructor phone number, and we want the other two parameters to be created automatically by the computer. So we could do that by creating another constructor, but we could also come up here and do that with IntelliJ because it's got the capability for adding constructors as well in that generate option. Click on generate. I'm going to select the first option, which is constructor. And it asks which fields do you want to include in the constructor. So which ones are we going to have passed to us? In other words, which are the parameters to be used? So I'm going to select those three: customer name, email address, and phone number. Add those. So there's our third constructor now. And you can see it's only updating the three fields. So that's one way of doing it. But of course, the disadvantage there is that our number and our balance haven't been automatically updated. So what we could do is we could put this, and then we can assume that it's going to be the default account number, we might say is 99999, and the default balance is $100.55. Then we'll pass the customer name, the customer email address, and the customer phone number. So you can see what we've done there is we've defaulted two parameters. So we've come up with what the default is because they weren't specified, and we've still gone back and called our major constructor. This is the one that actually updates all the fields. So you will find as you start creating and writing more complex code, it's not unusual to see multiple constructors like this. And in that situation, often you do all your initialization in the one constructor, like you can see here, and the other constructor should just call that major constructor. That's a good way of doing things. And it often leads to really good coding because you're not having to duplicate code or duplicating initialization in more than one place, so on and so forth. So how would we call that? Well, we'd call that very much the same as we've been doing before. We could create a new class here, account, Tim's account equals new account, Now you can see what's happened there is we've got three options now. IntelliJ is saying, okay, there's three constructors that have been created for this class. So I'm going to start typing. You can type, put Tim at email.com, and 12345 for the phone number. I've got a 1950s phone number. Okay, so you can see how that constructor was created, and of course we can confirm that's working. Tim's account dot get number to make sure it's a number, and we'll just Tim's account dot get and just make sure the name is actually set. Let's just run that to make sure that it's working. 99999, which was the default account number here, as you can see, and the name was Tim, which of course is what we passed here. So that's constructors. You'll see those used extensively in Java, and of course we'll be using that a lot in this course as we move forward because they are a very important part of creating objects from classes. Okay, so it's time for a challenge. I'm going to comment that code out. Okay, so the challenge is to create a new class called VIP Customer. So it should have 3 fields: the name, the credit limit, and the email address. So what you want to do is create 3 constructors. The first constructor should be empty, and that should call the constructor with 3 parameters that we're going to create, passing on any default values. The second constructor should pass on the 2 values it receives as parameters and then default the third value. And the third constructor should just save all the fields that it receives because it's going to have the 3 parameters, one for each field. Create getters only. You don't need setters because we're saving the field values using the constructor. And see if you can figure out how to create getters only using the code generation feature of IntelliJ. And of course then test and confirm it works by writing code in the main class, which was generated by IntelliJ. So pause the video now, go away and give that a go, and when you're ready to see what my solution is, come back and we'll take it from there. Okay, how did you get on? Did you figure it out? So let's get started. I need to bring up my project window. Now it's Command 1 on a Mac. If you want to know what it is on your system, go to Tools, Windows, and look at the shortcut. So I'm going to create a new class called VIP Person. Need to have 3 fields. Okay, like so. And the first constructor should be empty. The second one should pass on the 2 values. Third constructor should save all the fields. So what we can do is we can use the generation features of IntelliJ. Create a constructor. So the first one we're going to do is create the constructor with the 3 values. And this is when you want to start getting used to IntelliJ code generation features because it's really a much quicker way of creating stuff than typing it. Really handy for this sort of stuff. So the second constructor needed only 2 parameters. So let's default the email address and just save the first 2, like so. And we'll come back to that in a second. And the third constructor, of course, is just going to be VIP Person without any parameters. And that's going to call this. So we'll set that one up first. It's going to be default to default name 50,000 and email address default@email.com. This one here, we don't want to save the fields. We want to call the other constructor. So what we want to do there is we've got the name and the credit limit. So we're going to put this name, credit limit, and we're going to default, and we'll call it unknown, just so we know that it's different. So that's our 3 constructors now that are created. You can see the first 2 constructors call the third constructor, and the third constructor is the only one that actually does save the values into our fields. And using our code generation, I'm using the shortcut, but if you don't know what that is, go into the code menu, generate, and look at the shortcut for your platform. Now this is the one I wanted to show you, getter only. You don't have to do getters and setters. You can just type getter, type the 3 or select the 3 you want to create getters for, press enter, and there's our 3 getters created. Very nice. Okay, so what we now need to do is confirm that this works. So we just go back to our main class. We're going to do VIP Person. We'll put person 1 equals new VIP Person. And we should be able to do person1 dot get name. just to confirm that something's worked there. We assume that 1's okay, that all of them are. So VIP person, person2 equals new VIP person. And of course we've got one there with 2 parameters, which were the name. So we'll put Bob and 25,000. And the third parameter should be created for us automatically. And we'll do similar thing, person2.getName, which should be Bob because we've passed that. And VIP person, person3 equals new VIP person, Tim, $100, and tim@email.com. And print out person3.getName. So that should be our code now to test that this is working. Let's run that. Default name was the first one with no parameters. So we just go back and check our code. We can see the default code was default name 50,000 and defaulted email. So that's working. And for the second one, I'll run that again. Bob was the second one, so that's confirmed that that's worked. And the third one was Tim, which we've confirmed is also working. And what we could do there, if we really wanted to be sure, we could actually just do a printout also of the person3.get email address, just to make sure that it is set to tim@email.com. We'll run that. tim@email.com, which of course hasn't been used anywhere else here as the other constructor. So that's it. That's Constructors. Hopefully you've got a lot out of that. We actually had a student who actually looked at this particular lecture after it went live and noticed a small problem. So I just want to go over and show you the discussion in the course first. So this is from Brian N, and he actually said that when creating the withdrawal method's if statement, the operator, which is less than equal, should be a strict inequality less than, and that's because if you deduct the withdrawal amount from the balance, a valid amount is still having a zero balance. And the way I've coded it in the example is that it's either less than equal rather than less than. So what I'm going to do is show you what I mean and make the change just so you can see how the code was meant to look. So if we go back to the code and have a look, so the problem is if we go into account and specifically the withdrawal method, at the moment you can see the withdrawal method, the test is if the current balance, this dot balance take, the withdrawal amount is less than or equal to 0, then we're coming up with an error that the withdrawal won't be processed. When in actual fact, it's quite valid, say if you've got $100 in your bank account, to withdraw 100 and to leave a balance of 0. That's quite valid, but this code as it's written, because we're using less than or equal to 0, won't actually work. It won't actually process it if you're entering an amount, a withdrawal amount that's once deducted of the balance leaves you at exactly 0 money in your account. So to get this to work, what we need to do is uncomment some of this code because the problem is in the account class. So I'm going to actually briefly comment this out because we're not using that for this part of the video. Comment that out and actually uncomment this component here. And if we go back and just have a look at our constructor again, just to familiarize ourselves with it again, we've actually got a balance of $100.55, which is given to us by default if we're actually using this particular constructor. So just to confirm that, if we go back and go into the main class again, and we'll put current balance is Tim's account.getBalance. And if we run that, just to verify that that's the amount of money that's in there, current balance is $100.55. Okay, so far so good. So now if we try and actually withdraw that exact amount, so we put Tim's account dot withdraw the exact amount, which was $100.55. So we try and do that and process it. Current balance is 155, only 155 available, withdrawal not processed. Well, that's clearly an error. And we should be able to withdraw $100.55 because that's what the amount is in the bank. So we go back to our account class. And the problem is in this withdrawal method, where it's got less than equal, less than is the appropriate operator we should add here. We only want to actually cause this to come up with an error if deducting an amount of the balance leaves us with an amount that is less than 0 instead of less than or equal to 0. So now if we go back and run this again, we actually get withdrawal of $100.55 processed, remaining balance is 0.0, which of course is quite valid. So that's it. I just wanted to add this little part in here just to be correct with the code. Thanks again to Brian for pointing that out, I should say. And just to let you know, I've also updated the source code. So if you do download the source code, you'll actually see that fix in the code as well. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about inheritance, because each time you create a class, what's happening is Java is actually giving you those extra fields and methods that we talked about previously. So we're going to talk about inheritance and how that works in the next video.